Hey everybody, Kevin Johnson from No Trouble here. I'm so excited to bring you my interview with the very funky Freekbass. We get into all sorts of great information. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that the video did not capture my side of the screen, so you're going to be hearing my disembodied voice speaking with the man himself. But we get into all sorts of good information about the funk icon that gave him his name, how he uses effects to stick out in a mix, and then 3 to 4 bass lines that every funk bass player should know. So please enjoy this interview with Freekbass. I really love the story behind the name Freekbass, so I was just wondering if you'd share that for anybody that's not familiar with you yet.
Sure, of course. Well, I was in the studio working with the legendary Mr. Bootsy Collins, and there was the reason I'll kind of give a Cliff Notes version of it. One of his singers is a guy named Gary Mudbone Cooper. Mudbone's on like tons of the P-Funk stuff. He was Bootsy's main singer with Bootsy's Rubber Band, and so he was having me do some demo stuff with him, just play some bass on some. Now it's just getting out of high school, just starting to get my name around Cincinnati as a bass player. So I started doing some demo stuff with him, and just out of the blue one day, he's like, there's a label over in Japan. It's called P-Vine Records, and who are still around today, by the way. They're great label, like a funk and soul and hip hop R&B label over in Japan, and they were putting out a Jimi Hendrix tribute album, not cover songs, but songs written about Jimi Hendrix by different funk artists. I mean, I think some of the guys from Earth, Wind and Fire were doing a track, some of the P-Funk guys, and Ohio, I think some of the guys from the Ohio Players were as well. And he said, do you want to play bass on it? And I was like, duh, of course, yes. I was like totally like freaked out. And then I'm like, cool, well, you can just come over, because I usually would go over to his house and do demo stuff. And he's like, and just off the cuff, not even thinking about it, he's like, oh no, we're going to go over to Bootsy's. He's going to engineer and produce it. And I was like, what? Wait, what? So he brought me out to Bootsy's studio, which was like, driving to the Bat Cave for the first time. It was like, and of course I was like, this is so weird, surreal. And the second we met, it was just like, anybody that's met Bootsy, I don't know if you have, or anybody at No Trouble, or any of your readers, he's like that persona you see, on stage. He's really like that in real life. I mean, he's just like very, very giving, very like, the second you're comfortable around him, the first time you meet him, and him and I really hit it off. And so he was engineering the project, and he had me plug through. I was like, it was like, 18s and 15, like, his massive, you just play like boom, and it was like so it was like, the whole day was, I can remember like it was like yesterday. It was like very surreal. And but he had all these pedals around, of course, and so he was very encouraging. Just I was plugging in this one, what's this sound like, and I think so. The guitar player who was my guitar player in my band at the time was also doing a little bit of guitar work on it. His name was Chris. My name is Chris. My real name is Chris, but don't tell anybody. So I think, it was a matter of, he remembering our names, separating us, maybe not remembering my name. And he's like, and he kept saying, he's like, man, you got that freak thing when you're playing the bass. And then like, as the day progressed, the freak thing became, he's like, hey freak, come over here and do this. And then, hey freak bass, come over. And then other people in the studio that were there with us just started calling me freak bass. So it just kind of like organically grew out of that. And then he kind of stuck with it. And he's like, you should go by that. And so Bootsy's the one that kind of gave me that name, basically. And like the very short version is that's how I got it. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. You can't that's like the best way to get a name.
Oh, right.
From the man himself.
Sure. Yeah.
Had you like messed around with a lot of pedals before that, or was it like you were just like?
No, I was already. Yeah, I was already into the pedal thing big time. Just tonality wise, I was just like always the thing about bass, even when I was a kid, that obviously the sound of the bass like everybody else, but it was also, as much as I was influenced by like bass players, like I was hugely into like people like Bernie Worrell, from P-Funk, and like, obviously he's not a bass player, but he was playing bass lines on Moog and stuff. So like Moog, and then of course up the road from Cincinnati, there's a band called Zap, for More Bounce to the Ounce, and like those bass sounds, which are probably mostly keyboard bass sounds, but I just love the way those sounds. And like, I loved all the Dr. Dre stuff and Snoop Dogg stuff, again, a lot of key bass stuff. So I was always trying to figure out almost ways to make my bass sound like that too as well. And because of like, my favorite kind of bass playing, I love getting crazy and fancy and doing all that kind of stuff, but probably my favorite bass line of all time is Papa Was a Rolling Stone, and as you know, it's 3 notes. And it's like I like the space as much as I like when I'm playing, and the space to me as much as the music is when I'm actually physically playing notes. And to do that like sonically, it helps when you have, the pedals help with those sonics, and that's a big part of it too. And also, like, I use obviously a lot of filters, Qtrons, Mutrons, all that kind of stuff. And part of it is the tonality of it, but also it was to help make my bass cut within a mix. I was playing when I first started touring out of high school. I was touring in this group called Shag, and it was my first touring. It was a big like 10, or I think we were 9-piece funk band. And it was the first time I toured and stuff. And there were so many people on stage, and it was like so much air was taken up. It was like a way to kind of help my bass pop. So it was almost like an EQ thing as much as it was like a sonic tonal thing too as well. And that's even to today, that's one of the reasons I like, even live, like, I don't go crazy with like the filtery like wah aspect of it. It's just more just kind of to help it kind of pop for the EQ aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you have like
Yeah.
any specific advice for setting that for bass players to kind of pop out like that?
Well, with the thing about that, so I mean, every filter pedal has its very distinct sound. Like, the MXR bass envelope filter, for instance, which is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorites, because it's got a lot of with the envelope filters. The one thing you have to be careful of, depending on who you use, they can suck your bottom end out and make it kind of sound thin. So that's why, again, I like the MXR so much, because it's still very full and rich and fat sounding. The Qtrons and the original Mutrons for sure are like that. In terms of like setting it up, so much of it, it's almost like the filter pedals are almost like their own instrument. So because it's like, depending on how hard you're pulling or plucking or with your finger playing, so you really, like, I could set it up one way and it would sound totally different if you played it, so just because it's all how your attack is. And again, that's what I think the cool thing about it is that it like really adheres to your playing, so you almost kind of play to it as it plays to you too. And it's so human like, and that's why I've always loved filter pedals so much, because they do every like, again, like we could have the exact same setup and you would sound different, and Bootsy would sound different, and Larry Graham would sound different, and Stanley Clark would sound, everybody sounds even if the exact same settings, because it's all, you've heard this I'm sure a million times, but 99% of the sound still comes from here. It's not the pedal. The pedal enhances what comes from here, but it's still ultimately from your hands.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like a big upright guy, and like it doesn't matter what bass Ray Brown had, he sounded like Ray Brown.
Right.
Like
Perfect example. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm
I
totally
I got to see him when I went to one of those Jamie Aebersold clinics when I was a kid, in high
really.
school.
Uh-huh.
There's one in Louisville every year, which is only a couple hours away from Cincinnati, which is where I'm from. And my teacher, my private when I was playing upright, is a guy named Len Seaton, who's also a big jazz guy. You probably know of
I know
Len.
Lynn.
Yeah.
I love Lynn.
Yeah.
He's
Oh
great.
yeah. Oh yeah. He's amazing, and he was a big influence on me when I was just kind of starting to do that. And so he was down there. So he brought me that night. Ray Brown was playing in town, and I got to see him play. And it was like, again, one of those life changing, like, oh, moments, just tonally. And that goes back to even when I was talking about at the beginning of the conversation about big notes and the space, because he really played with that space in such a great way.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, you brought up Cincinnati. Cincinnati, I think, is such a big part of, I guess, a part of your musical identity, but it's such a big part of like funk music in general. When you were coming up, were all the local bands like funk bands, or is there more rock, or what were you listening to like local groups?
Sure, sure. As you mentioned, Cincinnati's all the way back to, for those that don't know, all the majority of the James Brown hits were recorded in Cincinnati. Now, James is not from Cincinnati; he's from Augusta, Georgia, but his label, which is King Records, is in Cincinnati, which is why we know who Bootsy is today, because Bootsy was here, and that's how he got picked up from James Brown. So there's always been this very, very rich history of funk, and then going into that's obviously 60s and 70s, and then in the 80s, you had there's a band called Midnight Star, which is kind of like a 80s kind of R&B funk band from here. There was, like I mentioned earlier, Zap from Dayton, which is like 40 minutes up the road, and Ohio Players, and so the list just goes on and on. It's always been around. Now for me, it was a lot of my friends when I was growing up were like listening to, like Green Day and Nirvana and stuff, which I loved all that stuff too, and I'm a huge fan of that. But I was getting into, by even that from Cincinnati, it was Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and I know those are West Coast guys, but all the music that they were using for their music was music from my area around here, so. And I always say I'm sure I will be playing music no matter what part of the world I grew up in. But you are correct in this, that growing up in Cincinnati was a huge, huge influence on the way I play. I remember, again, like one of those moments like it was yesterday, and I was probably 6 or 7 years old, being with my dad. I was at a hardware store, and a guy walked by the window with a big boombox playing More Bounce to the Ounce, and that was like, again, it was one of those moments, and I wasn't even playing bass yet, and I just remember that doom, doo doo doom, gong gong. I mean, it was like penetrated me at that age, and you know, it's because they were getting tons of airplay around here because they were from this area, and so I think that this being in Cincinnati, it's just that, and bluegrass are really big here in here, which is funny because King Records, the label that was James Brown, was both those things. It was funk and R&B, and then bluegrass and country, too. So Cincinnati's almost a twin city because we're right on the border of Kentucky. So there's Cincinnati and Covington and Newport. So it's you've got this urban area mixed with this rural area, kind of like butted up against each other.
Yeah, that's what I was talking with Jared Michael Nickerson about. He's a Dayton guy
Oh yeah,
originally, and he was just talking about like just the cultural clash that kind of happens, not in a bad way, but like you get
right.
like the Southern etiquette and manners and kind of stuff, but then you get the
Yeah.
hard scrabble kind of life from the industrial areas. So
Right, right, right.
I
And I've
just
heard Dayton. I've heard that I was always like wondering like why are so many, because there's so many funk bands from Dayton. Again, Zap, Ohio Players, Lakeside. It just goes on and on and on. Daz band I think is from that area. Or some of the guys are. They might be from Cleveland, but some of the guys are from Dayton. But I heard a big part of it is because that's where there's a heavy Air Force base there, and so a lot of the military guys, when they in like the late 60s, early 70s, would settle there, and then they would buy their kids instruments, and those kids ended up growing up and becoming the Ohio Players or whoever the case may be. So yeah, it's right Patterson Air Force Base, yeah, which is a pretty big Air Force base, yeah, that's based out of Dayton, yeah.
yeah, I just find it fascinating, like how that just cultural things like that lead to all this amazing art.
Yeah, it
So,
is. It's pretty special. Well, I mean, that's the greatest thing about music is that it's so geographic. Even funk, specifically. I mean, if you think of like Ohio, Cincinnati funk versus New Orleans versus Minneapolis versus Oakland. I mean, funk's got its very, New Orleans with the meters, and obviously Minneapolis with Prince and the time. I mean, everybody's got their very distinctive almost sound to it. I always say with Ohio, it's it's because we're not New York or we're LA, we're like the kid in the back of the class that was having to raise our hand a little bit higher for people to even notice us. And because of that, I think, like that's why you get bands like Zap and Bootsy that are just like, oh, you want us to play it on the one? Okay. Boom, boom, no subtlety at all. Like we're going to come as hard as we can, type
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. This is where we're from. Yeah, right.
Right, 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 right. Exactly. Yes, you got to pay attention to us, that type of thing. Where like if you're in New York, you can be a little cooler and hipper because you're in the cool New York scene. Or here we got to like hey, that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there are all these sorts of different funk sounds, and I feel like you've got a great way of melding a lot of them together. You do, I guess, keep that Cincinnati, Ohio sound like you have a lot of that one stuff, but you've got a lot of different influences. And I feel like that was coming through on your new EP. So could you talk about your new EP a little bit?
Yeah, you're talking about Chromeria, the one that just dropped, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the
Okay.
one.
Great. Awesome. I'm glad you got a chance to check it out a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, obviously funk is the overlying force on it too as well. But I'm as much as I'm into that kind of stuff. I mean, I love songwriting. I'm like, as much as I'm a geek for bass playing and technique and all that kind of stuff. I mean, as much of a Larry Graham fan as I am, I'm also much of a Elton John fan. And so it's we really try to and with Cremeria specifically and with Color Red, which is the label that album is on. They're such a unique label because first off, everything's done to tape. It's not virtual. It's not digital version of what tape is. I mean, you're going straight to tape, and then when you're recording, everything are all live takes. So there's no cutting and pasting. We could record a 4-minute song, and if you get to the last 20 seconds and someone messes up, you're starting all over and recutting the whole thing as one entire take all the way. So it has a different energy, a very cool energy, but a different type of energy. Because of that, you're able to obviously sonically able to saturate the tape a little bit more than you would like something digital, because you don't have to worry about digital distortion, and you can get those kind of really cool drum sounds and stuff. And so because of that, with both arranging and in terms of like the songwriting process, you really have to think of it as an entire, where when you're at home working on whether it be Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, you can kind of get the rough idea of the song and then kind of semi finishing up on the production side with moving stuff around or bringing this in or bringing that in, where you have to kind of commit to everything at Color Red. And it brings a different kind of energy too, because again, you're playing everything live. So, and which I love, it's great. And so with that album, everything we've done at Color Red, we have another record with them too as well called All the Way This, All the Way That. And it's a very unique and it's probably all the albums that I love, especially like the early Funkadelic albums and Sly and the Family Stone and the early Stevie Wonder albums. That's how those albums are recorded. So it's really cool, and to be able to do that, still today.
Yeah, the vibe and kind of the tone colors have that kind of feel too, like
Yeah.
that kind of like saturation a little bit sound in it is,
Right. Right. Right.
yes, it's just right.
Oh,
Um,
great. Thanks.
the Under Cremeria, that song hit me as like half meters and half like dub or something, just kind of from the
Oh,
reverb that's
cool.
on it. So
Nice.
how did that one come about?
That one came from it was one of those classic stories where we needed one more song on the record. We were out of color. We do everything at color. You actually Color Red is a studio, and it's also like a house, so you actually stay there and you're just totally immersed when you're recording out there. And it was a more. I got up an hour or two before everybody else did, and I knew we had one more song we had to do. The way you basically things go down from Color Red, you get up, you start the writing process, 10, 11. By like 1 o'clock, you're kind of working the song, playing through it, and by 2 or 3 o'clock, you're actually tracking it live. So you're like, it's like boom, boom, boom. It's a very, very quick process. So I have so many little song ideas on my phone. I mean, for a little bit of advice for any bass player out there, I'm an iPhone person. I'm sure it's the same with Android, but those voice notes, I mean, those are my lifesaver. I mean, any little idea I have, even if it's just like a 2-second little riff, I'll just pop my phone and do it like that. So I had that riff, that dun 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 bum bum, that main riff you hear in the song, on my phone. And so I brought it to the band that day and I said, hey, this is kind of a cool riff. And then everybody started, I thought everybody was going to kind of semi write their own little part, but everybody kind of started playing that in unison, and it kind of had this power to it. And then Eddie Roberts, who is the producer, he also is a guitar player on it. He's one of the co-owners of Color Red. He's also in a really great group called New Master Sounds from the UK. And he's between him and I worked out that B section with a little walk up section too as well. And yeah, it just kind of it came. It's one of those songs that you hear that a lot. It's like probably the writing process of that song probably under an hour of us writing because I already had the one idea. Then Eddie had the idea for part B, and we kind of worked that out. And then we just started literally tracking it a couple hours later. So it was a quick came together pretty quickly. That one did, yeah. And it's one that Eddie mixed that. Eddie mixes all stuff, and I even told when he sent me that first mix of Under Cremaria, I said I love all his mixing because he's got that real kind of almost like old school kind of sound like you were talking about too. But that one in particular, I said, Eddie, this is like my favorite mix you've ever done, So and if all the songs, like even on like a lot of the streaming services, it's shown up on like a lot of instrumental funk playlists and stuff. It seems like I think a lot of DJs like it because they can use little sections of it for breaks or whatever type thing too as well.
Yeah, yeah. It strikes me as the perfect like kind of tune that just like sets a vibe. That's
Yeah.
what people need.
Yeah, I keep hoping it's going to show up on a Netflix show or something like that.
That's
That's that's
it.
that's the next one. Yeah, yeah.
That's the thing, man. Oh boy. Um, let's talk about your tour a little bit. So
Sure.
when was the last time you had a live show? Did you have any last year?
Well, we did. We had a couple little spotty ones over the summer. We did some little festival stuff, like one here, one there, and but not a tour at all. It was getting to be July, and it was starting to feel like, oh my gosh, we're going to start. Everything's cool. We're going to start touring again soon. And then, of course, September happened, and everything in the world changed again. Um, so this is our first like tour where we're actually out on the road for consistent dates. We were literally touring up until when almost the shutdown. I think our last date was March 9th or 10th of 2020.
Wow, yeah.
We were down, so we were down. We did a rundown, mostly North and South Carolina, actually Virginia too. We'd hit 5 points on that, so this will be nice. This will be the first time we're back there since then. And I think we did Charleston, South Carolina, and a few other markets. Asheville, I know we did Asheville. I remember we played Asheville that final week of March, and it was a Thursday, and they had gotten one case of COVID, and it was like, oh my god, like it was like national news, like the whole town was freaking. It was one case, and then the whole town was freaking out, and we were like, what does this mean? It was a bizarre. Even that last week, it really hadn't kicked in yet, but it was like you were feeling all this weird stuff. I think that last day we were out is the day that South by Southwest got canceled, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is for real now. If they're canceling
Mm-hmm.
that because that was obviously a huge festival. So, and then a few days later was Jazz Fest got canceled, and you knew it was really happening. So this is our first. Yeah, our first time actually going out since then. So, which is funny because it starts in March, which is ironic. So it's exactly almost 2 years later. And I mean, I can't tell you how excited I am to get out again. I mean, I loved, one of the silver linings, and I'm sure you talked to a million musicians like this, and for yourself, it was nice, being at home, spending time with family, like kind of grounding yourself. But that was cool for the first year. Second year it was okay, but it's like okay, I'm ready to get. And I love my family, and nothing to do with them at all. It's just like I'm just ready. 'Cause this is what we do. I'm just ready to get out and start playing in front of people and with people. Too. Especially the kind of music we do is so and reliant on that interaction you get from the audience. And so yeah, I'm super super excited, and I know all the band is too.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. I'm real excited for you. I know you're going to have a great time. What kind of basses do you take out when you're? I mean, this is 2 years now.
Yeah.
You've had time to rethink what you're going to be
Right.
taking out. What kind of gear are you going to be taking with you?
Well, since, just a few months back, I actually started working with Music Man, Ernie Ball Music Man. I'm really excited. So they have a great artist rep there. There's a guy named Robert Ochoa. I don't know if you've ever spoken with Robert or dealt with him at all, but I've always been a huge music, being a funk guy, Louis Johnson, obviously, being probably the at the forefront with the Music Man stuff, and more modern folks like Joe Dart, so always loved the tone, but I never really. I mean, I've played them here and there, but I never really played one. And um, uh, f- a friend of mine, his name's Josh Paul, who's another bass player. You probably know Josh. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Josh and I were chatting, and he said, you should maybe give some of the guys at Music Man a shout, and so we talked, and it was like pretty quick too. It's like Robert got back pretty quick. It's like Freekbass, what's up, man? We should do something together. And then, and long story short is they sent me over a bass, and man, I love this thing to death. It's awesome. I mean, it's so I understand now after playing it why people are so enamored with it. Like most of the basses I've been playing over the last few years have been more boutique type companies, which I love those too, like Eisenberg, which is this crazy hot pink looking bass I play, and Stonefield, who are out of New Zealand, who are an amazing company. They even did a Freekbass signature model. I've got a double neck by them, which I'll probably bring out too, and they're incredible. But I've never had like a staple, company with a real rich history like the Fenders or the Music Mans. I never really had a top of the line type bass from them to see what that's like. And man, I just that thing, it's every single the one thing I like about the Music Man, besides just the general tone of the whole thing, is that it's like there, like even on the neck, there are literally no dead notes, like points on the fingerboard. It doesn't matter where you're at. It's rich and full, and the neck hasn't literally moved since I've got it, and I've had it for many months now. So they're a great company. Obviously great history, great artist roster. So that was really exciting to be with them. So Music Man, I'll be using them. Amp wise, I've been with Galen Kruger now for a few years and love them too as well. I've always been, for some reason, I've always loved combo amps. I think it's because when I was a kid, I had like a little PVT-NT combo, and I might plug it into that today and it might not sound like I remember it, but I always remember when I was a kid, that thing always sounded like, I could just throw that around. I would knocked over and it always sounded great. So I always like the self-containment of a combo. So Galen Kruger has these like really great combo amps that you can actually plug in together. If I'm playing a smaller club, I can use one or two. If I'm playing a festival, you just like chain them together, so, and they just sound killer, and it looks cool because they're just like boxes kind of sitting, real boxy looking, and so visually it kind of looks cool too. So yeah, so they're great. So Galen Kruger, and then I have to give a shout out obviously to MXR. Use a lot of their pedals too. Just we were talking about the bass envelope filter
Mm-hmm.
earlier. Daryl Anders, I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I love that guy too.
Daryl's amazing, and him being a bass player himself, everything they put out for the bass world is always just top notch, and just really sound. I had actually had him on. I have a interview show that I do online called Saturday Night Chit Chat with Freekbass, where I interview different musicians on my Facebook page, and I had Daryl on, and he said, we really take, if it doesn't sound right for a bass player, we're not going to just release it, and he takes real pride in that, and you can tell that in all their pedals. So yeah, so all kinds of fun little toys, and I'm sure there'll be some last minute decisions on what I'll bring out too as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, this is, yeah, I usually would say like, well, what do especially in this pandemic, what have you been doing with yourself the last 2 years? But as you mentioned, you've been doing the interview show. I saw
Yep.
you've been doing online lessons,
Yep.
um, and you've got, you've been putting out all these singles with other bass players, which have been really cool to see.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, when we knew we were going to be shut down from the beginning, like pretty quickly, when it looked like it was going to be a while, we kind of made the decision to do a single and a video a month. So up until just a few months ago, we were literally releasing a single mixed with a video a month. And then, I knew everybody was kind of stuck at home just like I was. So I would reach out to other bass player friends of mine, whether, Doug Wimbish and I did one together, Billy Sheehan, Josh Paul and I are getting ready to do one here soon. Yeah, so it's really talk about a tone master, dude. Man, that guy is like, shoo, he's got such the greatest bass tone. So I'm real excited to get that out. And another thing that I've really gotten into, and this has just been the last few months, and this is probably in terms of online stuff the closest thing to actually physically feeling like playing live is I've really immersed myself in there's a platform called Twitch. And Twitch is, it started off more as a gaming platform, and the musicians have migrated over to it over the last couple years, especially during the pandemic. So I have a Twitch channel, and it's been, man, it's like I can't even explain. You're playing, like, my thing is called Live Grooves with Freekbass, and I'm literally all these little toys you see around me right now. I'm literally just creating grooves like live on the same thing I would do if no one was there, but I'm just doing it in front of people. And you have the chat, and the chat is interacting with you, and they're giving me lyric ideas, and we're creating grooves together. and they have this thing called hype train where people start sending these thing called bits, which and it like it just you get it's like almost playing live. I mean, it's like has that same. I mean, your back are sweating and going crazy and stuff. And it's each again, I'm very pretty new. I've only been doing it for a few months, but excuse me. I love it to death. And the big thing of Twitch, you have to be very consistent with it. It's like in terms of like when you go live, and when you stream, you're not streaming for like 15, 20, 30 minutes. You're on there for, I mean, some of these guys will go on there for 4 or 5 hours. I usually do mine for about 2 hours. And you create, and this whole community happens. And then so like the whole chat, we call them the rescue squad. Everybody, we kind of came up with a name for them. And they are like, it's not just even about you anymore. It's about them like getting together, just like if they were going to a live show. It's like, hey, like, oh, so and so's here at the chat tonight, and then it becomes this whole community that you develop just from playing music. So, yeah, if any of your viewers, I'd love them to obviously stop over mine, which is just twitch.tv/freakbase. But even besides what I do, it's a really cool platform that I recommend everybody go and especially on the music side, go check out. It's pretty neat, and it's its own ecosystem too. It's if you have your own following outside of Twitch, that's probably semi helpful, but it's definitely its own thing too. It's its own little like kind of world there too, and I love it. It's really 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 exciting. It gets the creative juices flowing, and I even plan on actually doing an album based off of all the material that we're coming, because they all get recorded, and and they get archived, and I save a lot of them here too as well. And there are these just improv jams that end up turning these pretty cool songs a lot of times. And it's gonna be like Freekbass and the Rescue Squad or something like that from Twitch. So so in the next year, I definitely want to release something from that stuff.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's like I'm getting excited just hearing you talk about that.
Oh, it's so cool, man. I can't explain how it's so different. For a long time, a lot of people don't, they don't get it. It's like this weird because again, it was a gaming platform. It's like, what does that have to do with music? But then you start seeing, there's a lot of DJs on there. There are other bass players on there, a lot of guitar players, and everybody's thing is different. So like, some guitar players will it's almost like a tutorial stuff. Some will be some will do like requests, like, send me a song you want to see me play. And then they'll have like one camera will be on there, one hand, and the other hand, you can see how they're doing stuff. There's a good friend of mine's band. They're called Glow Stick Willie. And they kind of tour semi circuit that we do. And they like got on it right when the pandemic started. Like, so they've been on almost 2 years. And I think they're up to like almost like 10,000 followers. And they stream even today. They like, okay, we're not going to be live on the road. So their whole band too. It's not just like one guy out of the band like me. It's like the whole band does this. They're a trio, and two of the guys are brothers, so that helped, during the pandemic, obviously. And they have a whole room set up, and they stream, I think, 5 or 6 nights a week, same time. They have multiple cameras going. Like even in the chat, when you get to a certain level of the chat, you can dictate which camera points on who, and like you can like the chat can like actually they dictate the show that they're seeing out there. So it's like you can go as deep as you want with it. There's one show on there too. I'll just say this, and we'll get off the Twitch thing. It's that I watched this guy. He is I think he's a gecko. He's a gecko or he's an iguana, and it's this dude, and he's full fledged, dressed up like almost like a lizard almost. And so I think he's got like a smoking jacket on. He's got like this little like green screen backdrop of him in a swamp. Plays it totally straight, and it's a call-in show. It's almost like a old school radio call. He's even got a phone, and there's a real number on there, 1-800 whatever it is. And he just goes on there and gives advice from a perspective of a gecko, and plays it totally straight too. Like doesn't like break character, doesn't, it's like the very dry, almost British sense of humor stuff. And then it's like, so anything, you'll see anything on there, but again, their bread and butter is like the gaming stuff. That's where most people know Twitch from. But again, there's this whole other world that's starting to be created on it, which is pretty, talk shows, everything. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. The future's here.
It really is. And I think all this stuff was probably going to happen anyway. It's just the one thing the pandemic did is it kind of put all this in overdrive. You know, on the I talk a lot about this on my live streaming show. Like you just think about the film industry, you know, the stuff with streaming. I mean, all the streaming stuff was obviously happening before the pandemic, but now it's like crazy on overdrive, and like movie theaters are almost, I don't think movie theaters are ever going to go away, but they're almost like vinyl albums where they're more specialty type. Like you're probably not going to go see like a rom com on a Tuesday night in a movie theater. You're going to watch that on Netflix. You know, yeah, you want to go see Spider Man and Batman in a theater, Star Wars, but like, you know, it's most of that kind of stuff. Everything's kind of moved over into that world. You know, so
Hmm.
which I think is cool. You know, I mean, it's you know, it's you just gotta. This is the world we're in. You just gotta kind of be along there for the ride. You know.
Yeah, yeah, you got to roll with the punches.
Yeah, for sure.
No other
Yep.
way to do it, I guess, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I also wanted to, you're a funk aficionado. I wanted to get maybe, three or four hidden gem bass lines that you think people that are into funk should know about.
Um, well, let's see. I would definitely probably say if you've never heard Earthquake by Graham Central Station, that's, you know, I'm surprised as many bass players that don't know that. They know Larry Graham. A lot of times, most Larry Graham know Hair or The Jam. That usually seems to be the two that most people know. Um, but Earthquake, it is, I mean, that's life. When you hear that the first time, that's a life changing song. You know, it's between like what he's doing on the thumping side and the, you know, distortion and pedals. I mean, it's just Larry. It's like, you know, the calling card for Larry Graham. And so, yeah, Earthquake by Larry Graham for sure. Ba, ba, ba. I would say, you know, probably for, you know, I got to throw a Bootsy one in there, of course. I would say, I mean, there's so many good ones. Maybe Munchies for Your Love by Bootsy. That would be a good one. You know, if you want to hear what a Mutron can really do, I mean, it's almost like another that track. It's like the Mutron bass stuff. It's almost like another singer, the way that he's doing all the phrasing on it. You know, Bootsy. So many people think of him as, you know, obviously Larry's a thump and pluck guy, but you know, Bootsy's main, you know, bread and butter or his most iconic bass lines are like this heavy duty finger stuff. So it's, you know, and Munchies is like one of those types. So. And let's see, a third one. Let me think here. Oh my gosh, there's so many of them. Uh, I guess probably, you know, I was talking so much about space and, you know, how the space is as much a part of the music as the bass line is. And, you know, with the meters, you know, most people always think of Sissy Strut, which is obviously a killer tune. But maybe if for those that don't know, this song is Just Kiss My Baby by the Meters. I mean, George Porter Jr., I mean, he lives and breathes the space in that song. I mean, it's just like just big fat notes and just really like playing with the space in such a cool way. So I think those will probably be the three: Earthquake, Graham Central Station, Munchies for Your Love, Bootsy's Rubber Band, and Just Kiss My Baby by the Meters. I think those will be good candidates for people that might that'll really like change your. Those are life changers when you hear them for the first time, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you're about to rock somebody's world with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
All three
yeah.
of those at once.
Yeah, big
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Cool. Well, we've got the homework. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we hop off with you?
No, you covered it all. I mean, you know, would love to hopefully see some of your viewers out at these shows. You know, if you do, make sure you come up and say hello. And you know, it's just super excited. And you know, and obviously congratulations on all the stuff with the No Trouble stuff too. I'm so
Thank you.
it's
Thank you.
you guys are such like you are the one of those bedrock, you know, sites that have been around for so long, and it's, you know, you do so much for the bass community. And you know, I sent a personal message to Corey telling him the same thing. And it's just great having you, and it's really cool to see, and I'm sure you know this way more than I do. Maybe it was always there, but it seems like even in the last few years, you know, and this is maybe one of the things about the new world and the development of the pandemic, but like how much the bass community seems like it's gotten so much, you know, especially on social media for sure. It's like it seems like exploded in the last, you know, my Instagram feed is just like constant like bass videos of different people playing, and that's really exciting to see. that it's gotten to be so big and huge, and most, 99%, everybody's very supportive of each other, which is great, and that's even more awesome. So.